High-priced seminars claim their mind-over-matter training lets students walk barefoot over hot coals. But skeptics in Pasadena, California, proved firewalking doesn't demand psychic powers, just simple physics. A unique sting embarrasses Kansas City astrologers who give flattering character readings to one of America's most depraved serial killers. Gulf Breeze, Florida. Some call these the most revealing UFO photographs ever taken, until evidence appeared suggesting that the pictures had been faked. It's easy to accept supernatural or paranormal explanations for puzzling events. Easy, but often unwise. You'll meet scientists and skeptics who warn that when we jump to conclusions about the unexplained, we may be fooling ourselves, or someone may be fooling us. Follow me for some revealing explorations into the paranormal. I'm Steve Shaw. I'm a mentalist, a magician of the mind. Audiences might think I have psychic powers, but I warn them before each performance that what they are about to see may only be a trick, that they shouldn't believe everything they see. Unfortunately, real life doesn't come with such warnings. Over the years, millions of people have come to believe, often passionately, in all kinds of fantastic phenomena. Some of these beliefs are harmless. Others can be very dangerous. Some people literally won't go out of their house if their horoscope is unfavorable. Thousands more have been built, sometimes robbed of their life savings, by phony spirit mediums, crooked psychic detectives, and vicious medical quacks. At other times, paranormal practitioners who seriously believe in their own powers will attain frightening influence. Astrologer Joan Quigley influenced decision-making in the Reagan White House for 6 years. Harmless or dangerous, most paranormal claims come to be accepted in the same way. Consider this. The phone rings. You pick it up.
Hello? Louise.
It's someone you know.
I was just thinking about you.
Someone you've been meaning to call for days.
I don't know, you've just been on my mind lately.
But now she's called you. Coincidence?
Sure.
Of course it's coincidence, but thousands of people have been moved to believe in synchronicity or mental telepathy by experiences no more extraordinary than this one. It's only human nature. Human beings evolved to look for patterns in everything.
But we're so good at it, we recognize patterns even when they aren't there. And so one of the problems is we are prone to see meaning and patterns even in random events.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And the burden of proving an extraordinary claim lies solely upon the person who makes it. Paranormal belief flourishes when magical thinking overtakes scientific thinking. Maybe that's why it has grown so rapidly in America, where scientific literacy runs at a shocking 94%. One organization fights for objective scientific scrutiny of paranormal claims. Paul Kurtz is chairman of the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. Why was PSYCOP founded?
PSYCOP was founded in 1976 by leading scientists and skeptics the world over. Its purpose is to encourage the critical investigation of paranormal and fringe science claims, then to report the factual results of those investigations to the public. PSYCOP is a non-profit scientific and educational organization. Its journal, The Skeptical Inquirer, is read worldwide. Similar organizations now exist in more than 22 countries. Perhaps the most important reason is that fellows and supporters have helped to generate one of the richest bodies of scientific literature on the paranormal that has ever existed.
What do you think makes paranormal beliefs so attractive to so many people?
That's a puzzling question. I think people are fascinated with the unknown, the mysterious, and the occult. And if something appears in the media, or they read a book or read an article, they think it's true. There's been a blurring of the distinction between fiction and reality. Namely, a failure to understand that you need reasons, you need evidence, you need to test claims critically and experimentally.
As far as you know, has any paranormal claim in any field ever stood up to careful scientific examination?
Well, I think you have to have an open mind, but I'm sorry to report that on the basis of extensive research by hundreds of investigators, we can find no hard data which would show a paranormal cause. Generally, if you keep looking hard enough, you can find out why something happened. And most likely it's a prosaic and a natural and a normal cause.
Thank you, Dr. Kurtz. One of the most popular paranormal subjects is astrology. One of Psychop's first initiatives has been a campaign encouraging newspapers to run disclaimers above their daily horoscopes. Kendrick Frazier is editor of Psychop's journal, The Skeptical Inquirer.
And most editors do realize that astrology is not scientifically supported, it's not scientific, and they feel somewhat embarrassed about the columns. They know they're quite popular, however, and they're not in the job of taking out popular features. But many have relegated them to the comics pages or otherwise de-emphasize them rather than emphasizing them.
Investigators affiliated with an autonomous local skeptics group, one of almost 40 in the US and about 70 worldwide, found a most unique way to put astrologers' claims to the test. Do the alignments of the stars and planets affect our lives here on Earth? Astrology, a disciplined practice since ancient times, says yes. Scientists like astronomer Andrew Fracknoy say no.
Dozens and dozens of really well-designed tests have now been done on the efficacy of astrology, on how well it works. And every single one of those tests has turned out to be negative.
When it comes to astrology, about 200 man-years of research have already been conducted on astrological claims. Most people don't know that that much research has been done.
How could it be otherwise when astrology took shape centuries ago? Long before science made clear the actual arrangement of the solar system.
I think the reason that this is important is because astrology conveys the universe in a radically different light from the way scientists understand it today.
Yet faith in astrology persists. Do the stars tell contemporary astrologers anything? Autonomous local skeptics in Kansas City, Missouri, led by Tim Allen, set up a sting to find out by hiring local astrologers and asking them to interpret the natal charts of an unnamed but well-known person. They would test astrologers' claims to read out personalities and destinies in the stars.
Tim Allen was a student of mine who was a refugee from the New Age movement, testing his teeth on critical thinking.
John Wayne Gacy is one of the most vicious, brutal killers in American history. He was a serial killer convicted in 1982 of murdering 33 teenage boys.
Gacy was a contractor who would hire young men who had few local connections, invite them to his home, and kill them horribly. If astrology tells us anything, it should say volumes about John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, we got the birth certificate of John Wayne Gacy, and I sent off to California to get a computerized chart done by a person who's noted internationally for coming up with accurate computerized astrological charts. And we basically gave them to 5 professional astrologers around the area. We bargained them down to the cheapest price we could, and it seemed to run around $30, $50, $60.
It kind of hurt me to pay for these things out of my pocket. I think I ended up sinking $300 into the rent money for all of these astrologers in Kansas City.
Of course, we couldn't tell them whose chart it really was. So we found some friends who are about the same age as John Gacy. We wanted to know if they would look at the chart and decide if the person who belonged to that chart should go into the youth ministry.
The downside of that is that there are ordinances against charging for psychic readings in this area. and there are ordinances against paying for such things.
The idea was that John Wayne Gacy is a person who most definitely should not go into the youth ministry. You know, we asked him what was going on in the chart between December of 1978 and March of 1980. The reason for that was because we knew exactly what was going on with John Wayne Gacy at the time. In December of 78, he was arrested for murder, and by March of 1980, he had been convicted of 33 murders and sentenced to death.
The astrologers responded with colorful natal charts and page after page of interpretations, mostly suggesting that America's most prolific serial killer was a pretty nice guy. An astrologer, then popular on Kansas City television, had this to say.
I think that you can be very good with kids, and it might be a good medium for you to learn to be more trusting in the giving and receiving.
And here is what she wrote about the period between Gacy's arrest and his sentencing.
It was a time that should have brought you some recognition with peers, or just feeling that people liked you and cared about you.
A noted astrologer and psychic charged $65 for a 90-minute reading that included this observation.
Your presence would be of a beneficial nature to other people, a real calming kind of effect.
A $7 computerized reading described Gacy like this.
Extremely sensitive with strong feelings, kind, gentle, considerate.
But there was also a warning.
You have the right to get what you want to. Don't always be defensive and back down, or others will exploit you.
Advice that might be appropriate to almost anyone, except America's most prolific serial killer. And a nationally known astrologer charged $50 for an 11-page typewritten reading.
In whatever you do in life, it's important to let your personality show through, to have a line of work in which you can be yourself. And then he says you have an instinctive awareness, and your uninhibited response to life can refresh and gladden whomever you encounter.
And finally,
he says you are strange, but your strangeness is very important and something to be taken seriously. Given what is considered common in the world needs your strangeness.
A fifth astrologer was hired, but when the skeptics analyzed her reading, they found she had miscalculated Gacy's time of birth by 5 hours, despite the reference chart skeptics provided. Tim Allen sums up.
None of the astrologers were close at all to the chart. They all completely missed it. They were advising the person from the chart to go into the youth ministry, which was probably one of the worst pieces of advice John Gacy could have actually been given.
Today, when we understand that, in fact, the planets and the stars are distant cosmic bodies, completely unconnected with Sylvester Stallone's love life or anything else that's going on Earth, it really isn't appropriate to use the system of belief from thousands of years ago.
Next time someone tells you that astrology works, just remember the Kansas City sting. I was introduced to the paranormal as a teenager. I was one of 2 youngsters who approached the McDonald Laboratory for Psychical Research, a unit of Washington University in St. Louis. You see, we were bending spoons. Mind you, we could only do it because we taught ourselves a little magic. The parapsychologists at the McDonald Lab were studying metal bending as a type of psychokinetic ability. Did genuine psychic metal bending exist? One test would be for a couple of spoon-bending teenagers to enter what was then the best-funded parapsychological laboratory in the world. We would pose as psychics and see whether the scientists could tell us from the, well, the real thing. We were tested on and off for better than 3 years, but never caught in the act, even when our trickery was obvious. Here I'm using a scrap of hairnet between my hands to psychically move a clock. Soon after, my associate, Mike Edwards, and I went public with our deception. The investigators were embarrassed and angry, but some of them continued to believe that our powers were real in spite of our denials. I guess the moral of the story is that if well-qualified, well-funded psychic investigators can't unmask a couple of amateur teenage conjurers, we ought to be skeptical if they claim they have found someone with psychic powers. We've all heard about the power of positive thinking. Some self-esteem gurus go further. Sign up for one of their pricey all-day or weekend seminars, and they'll teach you to take charge of your life, To prove it, they'll psych you up so far that you can even walk on fire. Some local skeptics in the Pasadena area were puzzled, not by the claims about self-esteem, by the idea that it took any kind of psychic power to dash across a bed of coals and not get burned. Here's the story.
These people that are teaching these fire walking seminars and charging anywhere from $100 to $3,000 to learn how to walk over coals. The problem with it is the fact that they're also teaching these people in the seminars that they can control pain with their mind.
They came to see a demonstration that the wonder of firewalking was actually a wonder of physics, not a psychic achievement at all. Physicist Bernard Lycan led the local skeptics group responsible.
In my graduate school days, I had a friend who did spectacular demonstrations. And one of the demonstrations he did was a firewalk. He also stuck his hands in molten lead. And so I thought, because of talking to him, that I knew how firewalking was done.
The ability to walk barefoot across hot coals has often been taken as proof of mystic powers. Today, some say it is a sign of inner growth. Growth you can achieve for a price at self-improvement seminars that end with graduates prancing across the coals.
And there was a big article in the Los Angeles Times in which people had signed up for some kind of psychology seminar that involved walking on hot coals at the end. And these people were, as you might imagine, highly impressed at their skill. And there were many quotations from these people who were saying things like, "It's amazing we were able to overcome the laws of physics."
Lycan and skeptic Bill McCarthy decided to investigate firsthand.
Well, Bill McCarthy, my colleague, and I had the idea that Bill would take the seminar, but that I would not. I'd wait outside.
Yet when the students walked on fire, Lycan did too, though he had not learned any of their mind control technique.
The key to this is that heat, energy, and temperature are not the same thing.
Think about baking a cake. It's been baking half an hour at 325 degrees.
The air feels warm, but you don't worry about being burned up. You could even put your hand in the oven and touch the cake. That would be okay. But if you tried to touch the pan, you'd get burned rapidly. The cake is probably something like the embers that people walk on. As long as you aren't touching it for too long, then you won't get burned.
Lycan and his colleagues staged a dramatic demonstration before hundreds of onlookers to prove the truth about firewalking.
That it becomes a very powerful means of persuading people to believe the truth of everything that's taught in the seminar. And it's also a good way to get them to sign up for the $400 full weekend course or the $2,000 two-week course. And the people that are running these seminars are making lots of money. We're very hopeful that all of you in the audience will go around and tell people not to do this kind of thing. The crucial effect is the heat capacity. The fact that the embers don't hold as much energy as we think, but it's also very helpful to have your feet wet.
Is there truly nothing mystical about firewalking?
Do your feet hurt?
You can feel the heat, yeah.
They hurt now?
No, they don't hurt now.
Soon, everyone's getting into the act. Relatively safe, but not altogether. A few walkers got minor burns. Don't try this at home. And don't be fooled into believing there's anything mystical about firewalking. Are UFOs, unidentified flying objects, real? Are they spacecraft? Do extraterrestrials regularly contact, even kidnap folks like you and me? Let's see how a series of purported UFO photos from a small town in Florida came to be widely accepted, and how they finally came to be, well, exposed.
Americans don't just cite flying saucers anymore. In record numbers, they report close encounters, even abductions by aliens. Philip J. Klass is a leading expert on UFO phenomena and a fellow of PsyCop.
It's such a fascinating myth, the idea that we might have visitors from distant worlds, something I would love to be true.
But is it true? Gulf Breeze, Florida learned the hard way. A prosperous bedroom and resort community, Gulf Breeze faces a city of Pensacola, across 3 miles of bay. Some call it the UFO capital of the world. Mayor Ed Gray disagrees.
We're not the UFO capital of the world. We have a lot of people that have been victimized by a very elaborate hoax.
In November 1987, an anonymous Gulf Breeze resident gave the local paper Polaroid pictures, allegedly showing a UFO he had sighted over his home. The sighting claims and the pictures kept coming. Before long, the photographer came forward. Gulf Breeze contractor Ed Walters. Ed and his wife Frances lived in this Gulf Breeze home, where they often entertained their children's schoolmates. 3 teens recounted party games Ed used to play, in which he made double-exposed ghost pictures using the same Polaroid camera with which he would later shoot UFOs.
Now, if one wants to make a hoax UFO photo, the old type of Polaroid camera is the ideally suited one because of its ability to take double exposures, or even triple exposures if one wanted.
To some UFO believers, the Walters sightings were the best proof yet of alien contact. Others were not convinced. Consider this early Walters picture. Most people, photographing something as remarkable as a UFO, would center the object in the viewfinder. Ed did not. His supporters later argued that the UFO was off-center because it was moving rapidly. Yet neither the saucer nor the trees are blurred, as one or both should be if Ed had been swinging his camera to track a moving target. The Walters photos and his claims continued to multiply. He said that the aliens were telepathic, that they paralyzed him and took him on board with a blue beam, that an alien met him in his yard, the only time he forgot his camera, and that the aliens tried to zap Francis too. Ed remembered to get a picture of this. Ed put his claims into a hardback book, for which he received an advance of $200,000. He moved into a new, larger house in Gulf Breeze. There was even talk of a TV movie, with the rights selling for $250,000.
The ABC people are doing a miniseries, couple-hour miniseries.
Then the bottom started to drop out. Model maker Eric Buckaloo was one of the team of investigators assembled by a Pensacola TV station to try to duplicate the Walters photos. Buckaloo and his co-workers experimented with different models and different methods until they were able to produce photos very much like Ed's.
Basically, you take the camera and you photograph the model against a black backdrop. Go outside to wherever your background is going to be. It's going to be a skyline or a street or whatever, and you make your second exposure. Using this particular type of camera, you can make multiple exposures. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a double exposure. You can do a triple, quadruple, as many times as you can click the shutter.
Then, the people who had bought Ed's old house found a UFO model that had been hidden in the attic. It was made of foam plastic plates and a band of paper taken from a house plan that Ed Walters himself had drawn. When the discovery of the model was made public, that prompted this young man to come forward, saying that he had known for 2 years that the photos were not real.
The photos that Ed has taken and turned in and claims to be real are fake. They're not real.
Tommy's father recalls that Ed Walters contacted his son only a week after the first pictures ran in the Gulf Breeze paper.
Ed called Tommy and said, "Can you come over? I want to talk to you."
At the house, Tommy met one of his classmates and Ed Walters.
And they told him the whole story, They showed him how they were doing it. They showed him the model, how the model was set up on a tripod with a black pipe and the black backdrop. They took him into the bedroom and showed him where they photographed it, everything. They even demonstrated to him how they did it. And that's when they tried to draw him in.
Tommy Smith said Ed Walters gave him new saucer photos that Ed had made with a conventional camera and asked Tommy to give them to the newspaper.
Ed wanted Tommy to come forward anonymously or under his name so that he could corroborate as another witness to the truth of what Ed had seen.
Tommy was really a vindication for the police chief and I that here was an eyewitness to all of this that went on, basically verifying that it was a hoax, that it was an elaborate scheme.
Ed Walters denied using double exposures to make his photos. He said that the portion of a floor plan incorporated into the UFO model had been drawn too recently for that model to have played any role in producing his pictures, a claim skeptics dispute. He denied the allegations of Tommy Smith. He took and passed 3 polygraph tests, but the results were challenged because Walters had arranged and paid for the tests himself. When investigators gave Walters another camera, one that did not make double exposures easily and had been sealed against tampering, he made UFO photos with it. But the photos looked nothing at all like the ones he had made before. When Mutual UFO Network, the nation's largest and most influential UFO organization, held its 1990 conference in Pensacola, spokesmen remained firm in their public support for Walters and his claims.
We are 100% behind Mr. and Mrs. Edward Walters in the case that we've been investigating.
Behind the scenes, questions had been raised. Rex Salisbury was State Section Director for MUFON. Generally considered pro-UFO in his outlook, he had not investigated the Gulf Breeze case before.
And at the time the Tommy Smith allegations were made, we were asked by MUFON to conduct the reinvestigation, which was opened at that time.
Salisbury warned MUFON Director Walter Andrus that his investigation would be coldly objective.
I warned Andrus at the time that it looked, at that point, the case, the investigation would either way. Either we could find information supportive of its authenticity or disproving its authenticity, and warned him he should be prepared to accept that the case was a hoax if that's how it came out. I started looking at how to fake the photographs, and all of them looked pretty easy to fake with double exposure and other means.
Salisbury focused on this picture, shot through the windshield of Ed's truck, showing a saucer so close to the ground that its glow appears to reflect on the highway. But in reality, Rex Salisbury calculated it wouldn't look like that.
You can verify that for yourself just by looking at headlights from cars on the road. You see they lay very flat to the road. They look like a slit. Whereas this thing is wide. It's about 1/4 as tall as it is wide, which is not the kind of reflection you'd expect to see.
Advocates, including other experts who thought this photo was real, suggested that the glow might have been a beam or a spotlight, not a reflection from the power ring. But if that's true, where is the reflection from the so-called power ring, which ought to show too? Salisbury and other analysts also point out that the UFO is not reflected on the hood of the truck, though the tree line behind it is. Eric Buckaloo and reporters at WEAR-TV had also shown how the road photo could be duplicated by putting a scrap of orange paper under the model, similar to the piece of orange crepe paper that had been found inside the UFO model discovered in the former Walters residence.
News media representatives locally who I think will admit to you that they were taken in by the whole idea, did a complete turnaround.
Based on findings like these, Rex Salisbury sent a confidential draft report to MUFON headquarters, saying that the Walters photos were almost certainly hoaxed.
So I looked at it again, and I concluded that they can't be right, and this is essentially information I sent to Andrus at that time, suggesting to him it's not too late to take this evidence and show it to be the case to be a hoax.
MUFON's Walter Andrus circulated the confidential report, causing some of Rex Salisbury's sources in the UFO community to stop cooperating with him. In time, Rex and his wife were relieved of their duties in MUFON.
Anyhow, they rejected our work. That's the basis of it.
Some people would see it as kind of sad because it's been very divisive for the UFO movement. On the other hand, it's not surprising at all. It's almost like they're not so concerned whether or not this is true or not. They just want to know, is it good for ufology?
This could be the end of our story, an apparent UFO hoax, unmasked by responsible reporters and by conscientious UFO believers as much as by skeptics. But there's more. April 1990. Ed's book is just out. He will keynote MUFON's national conference at Pensacola, but questions about his photos are beginning to mount.
You seen a UFO? You haven't seen one yet. Maybe you'll see one pretty soon. You gonna go out tonight and look? Where do you live? Where? I'm gonna go out and look. Get my camera. Get your camera. We'll meet you. I'm gonna go down to the bridge.
That evening, a few people gather by the Pensacola Bay Bridge. They see something. A bright red light that flies out over the bay, over the bridge and away. The sighting lasted about 2 minutes. It is never identified, but the videographer who took these pictures was hurt when a hot ember, like a spark from a flare, landed on his forehead. Lights start appearing over the bay with amazing frequency. There were more than 100 sightings in 1991 alone. The open land at the foot of the bridge and nearby Shoreline Park became the sites of nightly vigils.
I will tell you that it is a strange coincidence to me that whenever a number of people gather at the foot of the shoreline and want to UFO watch, that all of a sudden these bright flare-like objects appear. That to me is highly coincidental. So yes, in my opinion, they're related to perpetuating the hoax.
I've personally seen it twice, and it could be a balloon with flares attached to it. It could be a kite anchored so that it's stationary, doesn't move around with flares on it. I really don't know.
These telescopic pictures obtained by an out-of-state TV crew strengthen the case that at least some of the objects incorporate flares. Other sightings may be of military aircraft. Gulf Breeze is surrounded with Air Force and Navy air bases and has one of the highest volumes of air traffic in the country. That leads to another concern. Flares, balloons, or other luminous objects launched near the Bay Bridge could interfere with aircraft approaching the Pensacola Naval Air Station or the municipal airport. And that's the story. The Walters book sold strongly in hardbound, less well in paperback. Pro-UFO groups remained divided over the sightings, and ABC dropped plans for its TV movie. For most residents, life is back to normal, but not for everyone.
Many, many innocent people have been dreadfully harmed by it.
Oh, I think Jenny and I bear scars from it. It's been a difficult thing to go through, and I think Tommy has too.
I think Tommy doesn't really care particularly to come back to Gulf Breeze, mostly because of this. You know, he'll come home on vacations. But I think for the children's part, I think it's hurt a lot of them.
Where the kids took sides on it, they'd been friends and parted enemies. And some of them still carry the wounds and the scars from having been involved with this type of thing.
And still, each night, the watchers gather. What has been learned?
But we learned a whole lot about people and people's frailties, people's weaknesses, and people's penchant for believing what they want to believe without any rational validity to it.
But people will still go on saying, I saw a UFO, meaning to them, I hope, I think I saw a spaceship from other worlds. What they really should say is, I saw something in the sky that I could not explain. But I'm not an expert on such things.
What I have asked you to do is to think of a word, any word in the English language. There is no way I could know what that word is. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. I want to show you something quite unusual. I'm going to take this scarf right here and lay the scarf out on this little pedestal. And I'm going to need a piece of paper. I'll put the paper on top. And I'm going to take this pen, set that on top over there. I'm going to take the ends and bring them around like this and just cover it up. And I want you to imagine, if you will, imagine the pen actually standing up and writing your word out. Are you ready? Watch what happens. Think of it writing out your word. All right. What was your word?
Steel.
How do you spell that?
S-T-E-E-L.
Let's take a look. What does it say?
Steel. That's incredible.
S-T-E-E-L.
S-T-E-E-L.
Don't believe everything you see or everything you're told. Those are words that can save you embarrassment. Or maybe everything you own. Or to put it another way, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and the burden of proving an extraordinary claim lies solely on the person who makes it. Being a skeptic doesn't mean being closed-minded. It means being cautious because, as our stories have demonstrated, there are so many ways we can think we're right when we're wrong. I'm Steve Shaw saying, till next time, be skeptical.